Good morning and welcome to our Live Talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our Live Talk program covering natural health on your Wednesday morning Rise and Shine. Natural health is what we're covering here this morning. We're looking at the topic processing lines, the lines that process food. And then secondly, I'll be looking at HPV and head and throat cancer or oral cancer. So this is what we're looking at here this morning here. I have two articles to share with you. So top of the morning to you. Welcome to our Live Talk program. Hopefully you had a blessed night rest and you're ready to take on today. And then you join me here so that we can share some health tips and some things that you need to know what's going on in our society so that you can have all your prevention and try to have to always deal with cures. So welcome again, and let us start with a short prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, we thank you again for the blessings of your word. We thank you, dear Lord, for the blessings of knowing thee. We pray, Lord, that as we learn, dear Lord, to be cautious in this world, that we might take heed of all warnings and live, dear Lord, without all the pain and suffering that goes on from day to day. Bless us, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. So, again, welcome again to our Live Talk program. As I say, hopefully you had a blessed night rest and you're ready to take on and deal with the challenges of today, whatever challenges may come your way. And so this morning here, we're starting off with this article. I'm going to share this article with you. It's a development that's going on, and it's something that I'd covered in the past that is interesting. When I saw the article, I was like, yeah, I remember this. Very important piece here that I covered in the past. And basically what it is that in the industrial food processing, there is something to do with the lines where the food, the chicken or the cow or the pig goes down the processing line, and the processing lines go by real fast, so the chicken will go down at a certain speed. And back in the past, as I covered here, there was a few outbreaks under President Obama. If you remember, there was a few outbreaks of salmonella and various different diseases that would be caused either by chicken or pork or whatever it was. And what Obama did was, under his administration did, was they passed a rule that they limited the speed. They limited the speed of how fast the chickens or whatever it is, the pig, how fast they got on the production line, and they limited them to 140 chicken per minute. So the chickens would go by on the production line 140 per minute. That's a little bit over 2 per second. And what that will do is slow it down, or put a limit on it so that it will give the inspectors an opportunity to inspect the chickens as they go by. All right, so that was the aim of that. It just gave the inspectors a little bit more time to see the chicken and go by, so if the chicken had any type of lesions or cancers or whatever it was, it would give an opportunity for the inspector to look at it and to be able to pull that chicken off the line as it goes by 2 chicken plus per second maximum. So this is what happened. So what this article I'm going to share with you first is that this rule here is going to be lifted under this new administration, and they're going to go back to the massive speeds or whatever speed they can handle. So as I say, I'd covered this before because I thought this was an important rule that needed to happen to slow the chickens down as they go by, so the inspectors could get a chance to look at it. As I say, if you ever work anywhere near a production line, anything going by at 140 per minute, that's a lot, that's fast, especially something that the inspector is supposed to be trying to see if the chickens have any type of tumors or so forth. And so this is it. So I want to tell you to be cautious in your selection of food. As you know, I promote and encourage everyone to be able to eat a plant-based diet, because then you limit your risk towards cancers and so forth. So here's the article. This is on NBCnews.com. And another Obama decision reversed. Now it's about food safety. Citing President Donald Trump's call for deregulation, Republican lawmakers and chicken industry are aggressively lobbying to speed up the poultry inspection lines, a change the Obama administration had rejected after warning it would endanger workers and increase food contamination. The National Chicken Council has asked the USDA to allow poultry plants to participate in new inspection system to operate at any line speed they can safely handle, freeing them from the 140 birds per minute that Obama administration had established for most plants. So again, what they're saying is that they want to free the companies to be able to to handle anything that they can safely handle. So whatever they think they can safely handle, they should be allowed to do it. So at this point here, there's a upper limit of 140 birds per minute. The Obama era cap is an arbitrary limit that is holding back the industry's ability to compete in the global marketplace, the National Chicken Council in its petition. So the National Chicken Council is saying basically Obama basically limit 140 birds per minute to go by on the processing plant. And so they say that's an arbitrary cap. That's not putting us in a place where we can be competitive as a nation to compete against other countries who don't have any arbitrary cap, and so they can process more birds per minute. So hence they can produce the birds cheaper. And I want to pause there because I want you to think about this, the whole idea of having a person who their focal point is just more jobs, more money. Is that always the best thing, where the only focal point of life is more jobs, more money? Because sure, you'll make more money, you'll process more chicken, you'll be able to sell a chicken at a cheaper market cut rate. But is that always the only consideration? Is there anytime food safety or the health of the people that you're feeding these chicken to, is that an important factor? All right, so just keep that in mind, because some people say it doesn't matter. What we need to do is rebuild the country, make the country great again, and we need to be able to put more people to work. And I don't know how this is going to put more people to work, and we need to basically, just make more money. But is that always the only consideration? So when you think about it as I read the article, because I know, I read it before, so I don't want you to miss this. Granting waivers would help the Trump administration achieve its goal of reducing regulation burdens on the industry. The council says, adding that it would help poultry plants cut costs and expand production to meet rising demand. But worker safety advocates fear that revving up line speed will harm plant employees, many of whom are immigrants and refugees already operating under dangerous conditions. Eviscerating animal carcasses requires workers to use sharp tools to make forceful, repetitive motion at high speed, and exposing them to toxic chemical used to kill bacteria. So as you know, I've covered this before here. This is something that I've been following, that after a certain change with the Jim Crow laws in the United States, then the chicken manufacturing and pig, the various different meat manufacturers turned to immigrants from sometime the Caribbean, and then when that didn't work, they turned to Mexicans, and when that became a problem because of certain crackdown, they decided to turn to refugees, and they have a lot of refugees working in these processing plants. So what we're talking about here is that they're going to speed the plants up, but the plants are being manned by not your regular Americans per se, but your refugees and immigrants. So, and these immigrants most actually using sharp tools to eviscerate, as they say here, the carcasses of these animals. So as I said, we covered that in the past. So the people who are going to be more highly at risk are people who are on the poorer spectrum of society. So when we're talking about make more money, we're not talking about for the poorer class. And so again, is only make more money is the only consideration. So we continue back to the article. There's no data to support that this would be safe. This would be safe, and even at existing line speed, it's extremely unsafe, says Debbie Berkowitz, a senior fellow at the National Employment Law Project, a research and advocacy group in Washington. Poultry workers are almost twice as likely to suffer from serious injuries as workers in private industry, and more than 6 times likely to have a work-related illness. Two poultry and meat processing plants, Tyson Foods and JBS Pilgrim's Pride, are among the 10 companies with the highest number of work-related amputations and hospitalization out of more than 14,000 companies reporting to the federal government, Berkowitz, a former Obama Labor Department official, discovered. So we're talking about for some of the top 10 companies that have workers that getting their body parts amputated, are workers that work in the poultry industry. So Pilgrim Prize and Tyson Food, very famous brands there that produce a lot of poultry, because again, you're dealing with machinery that, imagine the machine has to grab the chicken and move the chicken that within 1 minute 60 seconds there's 140 chickens. That's 2 point something chicken going by per second. So every second you count 2 chicken went by. So the machine is moving fast, and the worker has to be working real fast to do his work. And he has a sharp instrument in his hand, plus the equipment is sharp. And so the equipment is sharp, so the equipment, when it busts into the cavity of the chicken, all that blood and feces and everything is flashing everywhere. And to a certain degree, how sharp the instrument is. If you've ever seen it, you go on YouTube, you'll see the videos. And then after it does that, all that feces everywhere. So what happened? They have to douse that chicken with all kind of antibiotics and other sterilizing agent. And when they do that, then now the worker now is exposed to more antibiotics, more chemical, and then he himself is doing a repetitive job. So he's at risk of getting injured. And as you say, the top companies for amputation and hospitalization, 2 of the top 10 are 2 of the big poultry companies. So very important. So what we're talking about here, they're saying, well, all that matters is that we need to make more money. But at what cost? At what cost? So we continue here with the article. One congressional Republican pressured the Trump administration to relax the Obama era rule is Republican Doug Collins of Georgia, whose district is home to several poultry plants. Collins sent a letter to the Agricultural Secretary Sonny Perdue in May asking for a line speed increase, and raised the issue with the Secretary at the White House Summit on Deregulation this month. Collins says he's very hopeful. Industry groups point out that worker illness and injury rates in meat packaging plants have significantly declined over the years, but they're still higher than for the manufacturing sector as a whole. And meat packaging plants have repeatedly been cited for forcing workers to forego medical care, which can mean fewer reports of illness and injuries. During the Obama administration, Labor Department officials, supposedly by unions, immigration advocates, and other outside groups, have successfully stopped the USDA original plan to boost line speed to 175 birds per minute from 140 at plants that agreed to adopt a new poultry inspection system. So here, at one point, they wanted to boost the line speed. So that's how fast the chicken is coming down the line. So if you know, 6 trees is 18, so that's would be 180. So they're just shy of, they wanted to go up as just shy of 5 birds shy of 3 birds per second. So just want you to think about that. If you had to look at the carcass of a chicken going down to inspect the chicken of cancer, tuberculosis, and of other various type of diseases, and you had to look at 3 birds per second, after about 5 minutes, would you go giddy? And so you said that, well, the inspectors, they're professional. They know what they're looking at. After an hour of standing there looking at 3 birds per second going by for 1 hour. How would that work for you? How would you do? Would you do well on that type of breakneck speed inspecting? So remember, these animal carcasses are filled with all kind of cancers, tuberculosis, all kind of various different disease. They have tumors growing on them, and the inspector is supposed to see the tumor, see the disease, and pull the bird off the line. And they're doing this day in, day out. How many birds you think are going by? And I'm sure you remember, if you've ever been in any big meat lot or any butcher's shop, you see the bird stamp, say it was inspected, or the animal stamped and say it was inspected by the USDA inspector, and it's good. And you're thinking probably that stamp is an is an individual stamp by an inspector. The inspector went over and stamped the bird because he physically inspected the bird or the cow, or we're going to talk about pig in a second. So I want you to keep this in mind as we're reading, because most consumers probably believe that an inspector is like literally physically inspecting these animals, and then they gladly eat the animal, not understanding they're eating their cancer, and this is why we have so much cancer in the United States. So under the system which the Obama administration finalized in 2014, plant employees are the first one to identify and remove unacceptable carcasses. Formerly, the responsibility of USDA inspectors who oversee their work, examine carcasses further down the line, and do offline testing for contaminant. And as I said, I'd covered this here before. What happened before, it was just the inspector, and the inspector would inspect the chicken. But as the inspector inspect the chicken, he would be inspecting the chicken at this breakneck speed. But what happened also, there was shortage of inspectors. So this posed the problem and created this problem. So as I say, if you talk to the average person, they really believe that these chickens were and are being inspected, only to find out they're not being properly inspected. And as I say, they're not. If you look into this, which I've looked into this enough to realize the chickens are not being inspected, and the animals, they're not being inspected properly. So now they came up with this new system because of the speed. Let the workers also be able to identify the birds that they can see with disease on them and pull them off. So remember, if the workers don't catch it and the chicken gets down the line and the inspector don't catch it, that chicken is heading up in the frozen department or ended up on a rotisserie. As it's rotisserie and you bite, you're eating disease-filled animal. Continue back to the article. It says supporters of the new system describe it as an effort to modernize a long outdated inspection process by focusing on testing for bacteria like salmonella and the visual examination of carcasses rather than manually palpitating for disease that are no longer as prevalent. You can speed the lines up because you are standing right there looking at a carcass going by, says Michael Fisher, a former USD veterinary officer who worked on the inspection overall. If you have to pick up every one and look at it, you can only do that so fast. During the pilot program for the new system, poultry plants were permitted to operate as fast as 175 birds per minute, a limit that's still in effect for those plants. But when the USDA moved to expand the program to the entire industry, the Labor Department pushed to keep the limit for any new plant opting in to the system at 140. So 140 birds per minute. The USDA wants to raise the maximum line speed, but OSHA was very concerned that it would result in more workers being injured, says David Michaels, Obama former head of OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. We had support from the White House official who agreed that we didn't want thousands of workers to have their arms destroyed by having to cut up chicken at 175 birds per minute. Next thing here is about the pork industry. The Trump administration is moving forward with a similar overhaul of the USDA inspection at pork processing plants. A new regulation just adjusting this thing. A new regulation that currently under review at the White House, while the details have been made public, consider groups expect that the processed rule could increase the maximum line speed from about 1,100 to 1,300 hogs per hour. So at this moment here, they're processing 1,100 hogs per hour, according to the article, but they want to increase it to 1,300 hogs per hour. So this is the line speed now they want to do for the bigger animals, which is most actually the chicken. Is one number. So if you do that math, you will come to a whopping. I think it's like I think it's like 4.6 pigs per minute or something like that. Could even be wrong there. So anyhow, anytime you can come up with a way to do things more efficiently and more effectively, it's a good thing, says Mark Dopp, General Counsel of the North American Meat Institute, the industry leading trade group. He added that new pork plants are being built under the assumption that the new regulations will take effect. As with poultry overall, USDA inspector would still be on site to oversee the meat packaging process, but food safety advocates fear that the changes in the pipeline will increase the likelihood of foodborne illnesses, particularly since private plant employees who might be more likely to follow the wishes of the plant managers will be taking over some of the duties of federal inspectors, though the Trump administration have yet to issue a formal response to the poultry industry petition for faster line speed. A top USDA official expressed sympathy for the industry's cause in an interview with NBC News. We have 20 years worth of data over 4 administrations supporting line speed of 175 birds per minute, says Carmen Rottenberg, the acting deputy undersecretary for food safety. She cites testimony from the former USDA official describing the 140 birds per minute cap as arbitrary, echoing the industry's own argument against the limit. In 2011, studies showed that plants under the pilot program subject to a 175 birds per minute limit at lower levels of fecal contaminant and salmonella, although a federal watchdog later said that the agency had incomplete data and had not evaluated its pilot program thoroughly. So this is what part of it. So this is what part of what's going on here, because again, remember, it's primarily with chickens, the salmonella, and also with fecal matter being spread as the chicken is burst open, and then the other things with the other cancers and tumors and stuff like that on the bird. So just imagine the faster the line speed is, the harder it is to check. So they're saying it's still good. 140 birds per minute is good, and 175 is still great. So Rottenberg denies the USDA is under any political pressure from the Trump administration on the issue, praising the leaders of Purdue, a former Georgia governor and agribusiness executive. The secretary lets us do the work that we do to keep food safe, says Rottenberg, a holdover from the Obama administration. Celeste Monforton, a public health expert at Georgia Washington University, oppose a line speed increase, but anticipate that the industry will ultimately get its way. The fact that we had to fight the Obama administration to do this makes it hard for me to foresee success in beating this back, she said. The benefits are to the industry and costs are borne by the workers. Right? So this again is from NBC News, very important piece here on these food safety problems. So why is this important to you, just in case you missed that, is that it's important for you to understand not only what's going on with the processing of the foods that you might be eating if you're still eating animals, but is that you could understand why when you see certain outbreaks of diseases that is not without cause. As the lady said in the end there, that they had fought with the Obama administration to limit the speed to 140. So imagine if you're fighting with the Obama administration to limit the speed to 140, and you have an administration here now that is more pro-profit. Well, it's not going to be much of a effort or much of a success to try to fight to limit it to 140. So that's important for you to think about and consider well what's going on. And most such as I've encouraged here that you need to eliminate animal products out of your diet because of the increased contamination, the increased use of antibiotics, the disease load, because there's so much disease with these animals, that it's best to simply do this. Because the main problem when we talk about animals and all this type of stuff, the main problem is simply that the animals are filled with diseases, and the more disease we expose ourselves with too, is the more disease that we will end up coming down with. You want to limit your exposure to the disease, and one of the main place we get exposed to disease is via the food we eat, because the animals are diseased. And that's just simply what it is. And so as we've covered here, that 25% of all chicken, according to them, the industry itself, the poultry industry, 25% of all chickens have salmonella in them, leaving the production facility and at the supermarket. So every chicken you take up, one in every fourth chicken has salmonella. And so you want to be consider well what you're doing, and understand that if these rules go by, the chicken processing across America will increase from limits of 140 as a high-end limit to going up to 170, almost 3 chickens per second. And at that rate, the inspectors can't inspect fast enough. Number one, it's just too much chicken going by too fast. And not only the inspectors can't inspect that quickly, but also they turn over some of the inspection to the workers. But the workers don't respond to the American government or an outside entity. The workers are responding to, their boss, their owners. And so what's going to happen? Remember, they're inspecting because, again, the faster the speed, more fecal matter as the chicken is opened. So more fecal matter contaminant, and more antibiotic has to be spread and more disinfectant to clean the chicken off. Then increased line speed will increase injury to workers, so not just regular injuries but even amputations. Then also increased line speed will cause more animals to go by that have tumors and cancers and so forth. So, and then you just irregular salmonella. So consider well, and not only for your own self, but go ahead and if you can encourage somebody to just get off that, because I believe that when you do things like this, it will end up turning to more diseases in our general population. So I'm gonna move on now to my second article and my second topic, something that is is definitely health and I would say public service. It's important for you to consider well and to encourage those that are around you to break this habit also if they're into this habit. So this article again is taken from usnbcnews.com, and it's by this time Maggie Fox. And it's entitled "A Silent Epidemic of Cancer is Spreading Among Men." So a silent epidemic of cancer is spreading among men. Jason Mendelson had been married for close to 20 years and was happily raising 3 kids when he noticed the painless lump on his neck while shaving 3 years ago. Within days, he had been diagnosed with a deadly form of cancer caused by a virus that he probably caught while in college decades before. Mendelson, now 48, is the classic victim of head and neck cancer caused by HPV, the human papilloma virus. A new study out this week shows there's a silent epidemic of HPV-related cancer among men. A team of the University of Florida, Baylor College Medicine, and elsewhere found that 11.5% of U.S. men were actively infected with oral HPV between 2011 and 2014, and 3% of women were. That adds up to 11 million men and 3 million women, the researchers reported in the Annal of Internal Medicine. It's a sexually transmitted infection, and the more sex partners someone had, the bigger their risk. But the study found smoking also increased the dangers of a high risk infection, and perhaps surprisingly to some, that men and women alike were like who smoked marijuana were far more likely to develop a cancer causing strain of HPV. So that's important there. Just think about that. So this is a sexually transmitted disease, but if a person smoke, it increased their likelihood of catching the disease and developing a cancer causing strain. But if the person smoke marijuana, they're far more likely to develop. They're far more likely to develop a cancer-causing strain of HPV. So that's so, or you're taking a disease that is normally a sexually transmitted disease. You make it more potent if the person smoke, and even more potent if the person smoke marijuana. Again, because you remember the main argument for marijuana is that marijuana doesn't cause lung cancer. Yeah, because marijuana doesn't give a lot of tar that destroys the lung. But marijuana is a smoke. You're burning something and smoking. I don't care if you burn plastic and inhale it, you're gonna come down with more cancers. So interesting note there. The predicted probability of high risk oral HPV infection was greatest among black participants, those who smoke more than 20 cigarettes daily, current marijuana users also, and those who report 16 or more lifetime vaginal or oral sex partners, the researchers wrote. So notice here, HPV is greatest among black participants, right? So that's one group. And amongst blacks, they can be very promiscuous. Also, those who smoke more than 20 cigarettes a day. So the person is getting the HPV in their mouth, so to speak, or wherever they're getting it, and then they're smoking, which is going in their mouth again. So that's increased HPV cancers. Also, people are current, so they're actively using marijuana, and those who report 16 or more lifetime vaginal or oral sex partner. So that means that somebody said, well, I've had 16 throughout my lifetime vaginal partners, sexual partners, or oral sexual partners. This will increase the chances of HPV, and this is an increased problem now. So most people get over these infections and never even know they had them. HPV doesn't cause any symptoms at first, but in some people it stays in the infected tissue and cause DNA damage that years later cause a tumor to grow. HPV is the single biggest cause of cervical cancer and certain types of head and neck cancer called oral pharyngeal cancer. According to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, between 2008 and 2012, close to 39,000 people were diagnosed with cancer caused by HPV. Every year in the US, 59% of them women and 41% men, the University of Florida team reports. So in general, women have more HPV than men. But while the pap smear and the more lately HPV tests have reduced rates of cervical cancer, rates of oral cancer are growing. So very good news there that less and less, because of, I guess, testing, less and less, reports of HPV and so forth. There are now more of these HPV-related throat cancer in men than there are cervical cancer in women. All right, so keep that in mind, and later on, it will explain why. Dr. Erich Sturgis, professor of head and neck surgery at the Maryland Anderson Center, Cancer Center at the University of Texas. Frighteningly, the cancers don't cause any symptoms until they have spread. There is no way to screen people for them. Unlike a pap smear for cervical cancer, there's not a good test for oral HPV. The only way to prevent infection is the HPV vaccine, but once someone already infected, and that's most people over age 26, the vaccine doesn't help. That leaves several generations of Americans vulnerable for these head and neck cancers with no way of knowing if one is silently growing. Mendelssohn was one of them. I had zero symptoms except I found a bump on my neck, Mendelssohn said. And the ironic thing is that I literally shave probably every day and never saw or felt the bump before. It was stage 4 oral pharyngeal cancer. Treatment for head and neck cancer can be grueling, and Mendelssohn said his was no exception. It was brutal. I had a radical tonsillectomy, Mendelssohn said, who is recovered now. I had 42 lumps, lymph node removed from my neck, followed by 7 weeks of chemo, radiation, and a feeding tube. The radiation treatment was the worst. You have your head strapped down to a table and you can't move and you can't swallow your own saliva. So it's like being waterboarded. It's horrible, agreed Sturgis. That's ever more reason why we want to get kids vaccinated so that they don't develop these. Now an advocate for men with head and neck cancer, Mendelssohn noted that he was not promiscuous and did not engage in what most people would see as risky sexual behavior. I didn't married. I've been married for 21 years. I've got 3 kids. They believe I got the virus in college when I was 18 or 19, and it showed up decades later, he said. This is not people who were promiscuous or who cheated on their spouse. This is normal, like you grow up, you date in college, just normal, everyday dating and having girlfriends, plural. So notice it's not girlfriend, but it's girlfriends. He added, most people will tell you it's just oral sex with women who have HPV. It's like spread. It's likely to spread by all type of oral sex, Sturgis says, who was not involved in the research. So I just paused there. So he says most people will tell you that it is just oral sex with women who have HPV. So what he's basically saying here is that if you listen to most people that say, in order for you to get HPV, it has to be somebody who, as you're doing oral sex upon, who already have HPV. And so he says it is likely spread by all types of oral sex. Sturgis. So this is the doctor now talking, not Mendelssohn. And said Sturgis, who was not involved in the research. So he's basically saying just oral sex in general, if performing oral sex on any female will increase your likelihood of having oral pharyngeal cancer. It doesn't matter if the woman has HPV. So somebody could say, well, I could test the female, and if she doesn't have HPV, then she's good to go. And he's saying here, it don't matter. It's going to explain a little bit more in a second. So when you mark that, because remember, this is your health, and it's important for you not to suffer from diseases unnecessarily. So here it says, it's just likely spread by all types. It don't matter who you're doing it on. While 11% of men had oral HPV in the study published this week, Sturgis notes that only over a 3-year period, over a decade, that adds up to millions more. So in other words, if only 11% of men had oral HPV, well, if you keep multiplying that, if you keep doing that type of number every year, you're going to come up with a large number. So this is why, as they're saying, this thing is increasing. Now it's going to explain why. So when you keep your ears open, you can imagine over time, quite a bit of the population will be exposed to oral HPV. 80% of the population will have a genital HPV infection at some point in their lives, he said, and a significant number go on to develop cancer. Each year, about 11,600 people in the United States are diagnosed with cancer of the oral pharynx. That may be caused by HPV. So here now they're going to talk about dentists, that they need to get dentists more actively involved. It is not clear why the numbers are going up so much, but Sturgis says fear of HIV and of pregnancy may have made oral sex more common and more acceptable starting in the 1980s. So I know you're familiar with this, but just you, because you're listening and your brain is probably in passive mode. Just think about this. So in the 1980s, there was a breakout of AIDS, and also, people are trying to avoid getting pregnant and all that type of stuff. The birth rate has gone down in America as a whole, especially among certain Americans. So what they're thinking is possibly driving this is that people went from having vaginal sex to having oral sex because they didn't want to catch it, as it's going to say in a second, that and I'll read it and I keep commenting. It says, if someone has an oral infection, a theory that they can spread it by deep kissing. Unlike HIV, which is spread by blood and semen, HPV is spread in the fluid of the mucosal membrane, which lines the mouth, throat, and genital tract. So before we go on, so just think with me here. So you have HIV. So somebody said, well, HIV is spread primarily through, semen and through blood. So you more pick that up with vaginal penetration. So if that's causing it, well, probably oral sex won't be a problem. So what we have is people switch. And as I'd covered here a little while back, I'd covered on the radio, I'd shown that vaginal penetration is down across America, but sex is still continuing at the same rate. So what most people are doing, they're not stopping their sexuality per se or sexual activity. What they're doing is switching from vaginal penetration to oral using their mouths. So that's becoming a problem. So this is where they believe so much of these men, they're increasing now with oral head, neck, and mouth or throat cancers. And here's now a very important point why any type of oral sex become a problem. This is now from Sturgis. He says the highest viral loads tend to be in the cervix. So HPV tend to be more highly concentrated, or they're the highest viral load in the cervix. So the cervix of the woman has the most of the HPV. So sucking on that part would most actually suck a lot of HPV in somebody's mouth. So this is what's explaining now why men are coming out with more head, neck, and throat cancer, because men now they're moving from vaginal penetration to more oral sex. So this is the reason why. It's because it's the location. The physical location is where the disease is most concentrated. So here you have a disease that is concentrated primarily in the vaginal area or the cervix. And so Sturgis says men performing oral sex on women probably tend to get exposed to the highest amount of the virus. So again, this is a quote here I'm quoting. Men performing oral sex on women probably tends to get exposed to the highest amount of the virus because it is just a direct contact, and that's where the problem is. So this year, this Dr. Anderson and other groups, and no, MD Anderson and other groups, the research facility here, other groups are working to encourage HPV vaccine, but they're also trying to fill the gap for people too old to be vaccinated or at high risk. So I pause there again. So they're trying to encourage the young people to to take the vaccine so that they can get some immunity. And that's what they're doing. I'm here, so just in case you can't understand why I'm reading this. Remember, we're doing health. It's Wednesday. God bless you. And so I'm encouraging that, especially people who are older, because they find out a lot of more older men are coming out with this thing. Is that, you remember in the Bible in Romans chapter 1, it says, one of the concern with Paul, Paul says the men and the women have leave off the natural use of each other. Men, the natural use of a man would have for female sexually, and they gone astray, or perverted. And so, to me, what the Lord created is what the Lord wants to happen. It's when it comes on to sex, it is just vaginal penetration. There's no oral sex or anything like that, because it comes with too much risk of disease, and we're trying to limit the pain and suffering. Limit the pain and suffering. That will yeah, I see that. Limit the pain and suffering that is will cause, and you just want to limit your pain and suffering. And so, as I say, the society, because they're trying to avoid pregnancy and HIV and all that, they're turning men on men, women and women. And I think it's also bad for women, because if two women are going together and they're going to be performing all kind of oral sex, they're increasing again their chance of having head and throat and neck, cancers. So this type of activity needs to, as I say, to stop. That would be now on the moral or the practical point of view. Now here they're focused on the HPV. This is what they're promoting, the HPV vaccination. I'm just saying here, well, it's not going to do anything good for any of us over 26. So there's simply what we need to do is practice safe sex. Now, I'm going to read this section again, and then I'm going to move on. It says the highest viral load tend to be in the cervix. Men performing oral sex on women probably tend to get exposed to the highest amount of virus. We are working with the American Dental Association. We are working with them on both on trying to increase vaccination rate and in reducing smoking rates. So what they're saying here is, if we can reduce the smoking rate, so smoking, especially, let's say, the number one thing that will increase your chance of having cancers from HPV is marijuana. So if you can just reduce the smoking rate altogether, you might help reduce those who are already probably infected. And then most actually they're trying to encourage vaccination. There are few specialists in the head and neck region, but there are almost 200,000 dentists across the country. A dentist see adolescents. If we could get dentists to at least ask parents whether their kids are vaccinated, just by asking, we are going to help improve knowledge about the problem and at least get more of our kids vaccinated. So if you ask me about the vaccination, I'm going to read it here, because as I say, I'm reading as a public service type of thing, where I'm just trying to serve you, my listening audience. But on the vaccination, I don't have I don't really have an opinion per se, because I've read about it and read, and I think I've even covered a program in it, but I can't remember off my head what it is. Gardasil, I think it's called. So I'll have to look more into this again. But just keep in mind here, I remember, I think it was last year or sometime recently, I went to my dentist, and she wanted to check me for oral cancer. And I can't remember if I've ever had that before, but it seemed like it's something where the dentists are getting more involved to check for oral cancers. And so my dentist was checking me for oral cancers. And I can't remember if I ever had that before until last year. So this is something more and more, I think they're checking men for oral cancer, because more and more men are coming down with oral cancer. So that was new for me. I can't remember if that was last year or the year before, but that was something new that I guess my dentist started doing that here. So this is something that's going on. So this is something you has to be aware of, especially if you listen to me, you're male. This is something that's becoming bigger, and so bigger. So here's now this thing about it becoming bigger. So here it says the risk hit The risk hit the headlines 2013 when actor Michael Douglas announced that he was being treated for throat cancer and said he believed it was caused by HPV. So Michael Douglas, he seemed like I remember when he came out, he was like, he was befuddled. He couldn't understand what happened, why he had oral cancer, throat cancer. But obviously, it's very clear because I remember immediately when the headline hit, I went and did some research really quickly, and I say, obviously, I know why he has it, but he seemed to can't remember how he picked it up. But as the artist says, the more they find it, the more they realize just doing any type of oral sex, you're increasing your risk of having throat cancer in male, because again, it's not, I don't believe it's just the viral load, but although that's part of the truth or the reality that the viral load is high in the cervix and it's the highest concentrated in the body. But it's just a part. To me, it's like sucking on the armpit. That would be like something is wrong, because the lymph node and certain areas of the body is where you have a lot of concentration of waste, so to speak. And so why would you suck on an area like that? So it's to me, it's the same idea. That's why I believe you increase your risk of cancer, because notice they're listing oral sex with increased cancer, but also smoking, which makes absolute sense, because just imagine somebody take something they're burning and the waste, which is the smoke, they're inhaling that smoke, that's going to increase your risk of cancer. So what we'll see is more cancers because more people are being told, don't smoke tobacco, smoke marijuana. Well, you're burning something, and you're burning something that not only is it's a neurotoxin, but it's also smoke. That's the whole idea of inhaling smoke, or sucking at a vagina or sucking at somebody's armpit. To me, is just, you're gonna cause cancer. I don't care what they say. It's just totally logical for me. That area of my body is one of the highest scented area, and just not, it's near to the anus. It's just not the area that you would think you put your mouth and lick. So 2 FDA vaccine, Cervarix and Gardasil, prevent infection with HPV strain 16 and 18, which are most likely to cause cancer. A new form of Gardasil, approved earlier this year, add 5 new high-risk HPV strain to its coverage for even more cancer protection. Both boys and girls are supposed to get 2 doses of the vaccine starting at age 11 and 12. But the CDC says only 60% of parents are getting their kids vaccinated. Mendelssohn say his kids are vaccinated. They are. He says, I know they are fully vaccinated with HPV vaccine. So I remember I did this in the past. Just when I read that last part, some of it came back to me. Not all of it going to come back to me. But what came back to me is that when I did this in the past, there's multiple strains of the HPV. I think there's 100. I was reading before. I think there's over 100 and something. There are definitely 100 and something different strands or strains of the HPV virus. And multiple of them causes cancer. So when they came up with Gardasil, I remember studying this out. I think they only had covered 2 of the strands or strains, and then now they've added more. So just imagine, say there's 10, and you get vaccinated for 5. There's still 5 that are not covered by this vaccination. So now your 11-year-old and 12-year-old are told you're vaccinated and you're good when it comes on to HPV. So that child goes out now, so that young boy goes out and have girlfriends, plural. And then that young man goes out and perform oral sex because that's the new trend. So I guess it was always a trend. But he's going out and he's doing that full force because he thinks he's immune. It is a similar idea to antibiotics. You could just go do whatever you want and pick up any disease, and then the antibiotic will fix it. But what you know is that these diseases, not only they mutate, so the protection is limited, but the disease not only mutate, but not all the strands are covered. So as I just read to you, Gardasil And the old form of Gardasil that was approved, they add 5 new strains to it, and they're trying to work on new strains to give you immunity. But you're going out there saying basically, I'm immune from HPV, so I can use my mouth and suck at anything I want to suck at. But as you use your mouth like that, what's simply happening is that you're pulling in all kind of viral load. Because now remember, he has HPV, but your child can pick up other type of oral STDs or other type of STDs via their mouth, because remember these STDs are transferred via blood, and the lip, the mouth, and the reproductive organs, the skin is very thin, and often you could have still bleeding because of bruising and all kind of stuff like that. So you still can talk about various different other forms of virus inside the mouth. And so if you think about gonorrhea and all these different other STDs, they are transmittable via the mouth. So you still have to ask yourself a question. You still have to communicate to that child and to that adult, because a lot of these diseases are very prevalent in seniors, because seniors do a lot of these type of things, because they say, well, I can't get pregnant anymore. And I've heard even people say this to me, I can't get pregnant anymore, so woohoo, I'm free to do whatever I want to do. Well, wait a minute now, because again, gonorrhea is now primarily what you call drug resistant. Syphilis is drug resistant. They're getting more and more drug resistant. When you go to the doctor and say I have gonorrhea, and they say the form of gonorrhea you have, the strand that you have, is actually drug resistant. So this is the type of way that you have to think about it, that prevention is worth more than a cure. And so an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. If you have it, then, most naturally there's some natural things and some chemical things you can do, but you want to be able to avoid certain practices that are going to put you at higher risk. And what they're doing, they're going to create, I'm predicting right now, this is my prediction, I'm putting my prediction out there, that what we'll see is amongst this new generation of young people who have been given immunity, we're going to see more STDs. Because what we have done, we are saying we are vaccinating you, making you immune from oral cancers, head cancers, throat cancers. So just imagine what you do. You shoot that young man in the arm and say, hey, go ahead and just enjoy yourself. Which I'm not saying that you can't do anything on that front, but I'm just simply saying that's not a complete message. You need to make sure that child understand that you should not be doing that. You need to get some herbs, find yourself a partner for life, get some herbs to strengthen yourself, and learn some other methodologies to be able to satisfy the female. But do not go down that road where you think year in, year out, you're going to be doing that and that's going to end up well. I just can't see from a cleanliness point of view how encouraging young people to say vaccinate and whatever. So as I say, I'm not saying yea or nay. I'm just saying from my research, there's multiple strands that cause cancer. But be aware, understand that the activity, to me, I try to describe it in the best way I can, because I want to say that activity in going to that area and putting one mouth is not the best thing to do. To me, it's the worst thing to do. It doesn't make sense. Although I know there's other reasons. There are reasons why people do these things, but there's other solutions. Go find the other solutions. And, as I say, go get herbs, get things to cause you to be able to stay alive or stay in the game longer. And so you can satisfy the female, but don't go there and say this is what you have to do because you run out of options. So with that, we'll pray to close. As I say, stay far from diseases as possible. This is the best thing you can do for yourself. Let's pray. Father, who art in heaven, we thank you again for your love. We pray, dear Father, for each and every one of us that are here, that by your grace we might exercise temperance in all things. We might exercise self-control in all things. And in some things we might abstain from certain activities. Give us the mindset and the ability, dear Lord, to know best well, dear Lord, to live, to perform, to do the things that we have to do while keeping safe in this world. Dear Lord, I know that oftentimes, or in just this life, in our bodies, that we are driven by urges. And I pray, Father, that we might gain control of those urges by thy Spirit, we pray. For Christ's sake, amen. Thanks again for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow morning, where we're going to talk about current events. I'm interested in talk tomorrow morning about current events. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.